This is W.I.P.I, my work in progress that I may have given up on. He's just too cute. I wanted him to be cool, so I stuck him under the bed. If he were to work, he would have a cool grapple, swinging from place to place. Oh, and he'd have the ability to move stuff with magnets. You know what? Maybe I will finalize him. But wait, where did he go?
Hey everyone! As you all saw by this trailer, today I'd like to introduce you to what I've been working on alongside a few of my other game design classmates. Introducing a project called Fun Size, a 3D collect-a-thon where games like Banjo-Kazooie and Super Mario 64 inspired the mechanics, and games like the original Toy Story game and Skatebird inspired the art style. Here you'll play the role of a child's forgotten toy robot, and scour their room for collectibles to allow you to escape through a vent in the ceiling. In the end, you'll solve puzzles, find upgrades, and use your magnetic abilities to affect the environment around you. I played the role of producer and level designer. Caleb Waldrop played the role of lead programmer and composer. Hello. Jane Anderson played the role of art director and concept artist.
Hello everyone.
Levi Walker played the role of environment artist and sound designer.
Hello.
Alex Lawrence played the role of lead modeler and texture artist.
Hey guys.
And lastly, Peter Minneci played the role of animator, rigger, and prop artist.
Why hello there.
Our timetable to finish the project was 12 weeks, and so as the project lead, I wanted to make sure that we had plenty of time to make the game as great as possible. That being said, we finished the production of Fun Size in only 6 weeks, which gave us a whole additional 6 weeks to polish, refine, and playtest the game. So what did we do to have such a successful project timeline this go around? Each one of us played a particular role in the development process, and we all became familiar with each other's workflows rather quickly. In this breakdown, we'll go over the challenges we all faced individually and as a group, and how we overcame those challenges over the last 3 months. So without further ado, let's get into this. We all sat down at the start of the project to assign roles and figure out what exactly we wanted to make. We brainstormed a few concepts before eventually landing on the idea for Fun Size. Everyone on the team loved the idea for the game, and so as the level designer, I needed to begin planning out the progressional elements. After a few meetings with the team, here's what we decided. You play as a little toy named W.I.P.I, which stands for Work in Progress Indefinitely, and you explore a child's room from a smaller scale. Jane came up with this concept design, Peter translated that concept into a 3D player character model so he could animate it, Alex textured W.I.P.I accordingly, and Caleb programmed W.I.P.I to move like BB-8. Creating this player character was truly a team effort and set an artistic standard for our project moving forward. We also decided that W.I.P.I would have to obtain 2 primary items to beat the game, the magnet and the putty. These two are stark opposites, with the magnet giving the ability to move particular objects, and the putty allowing the player to grapple and swing along specific sections of the level. Anything radiating a green aura can be affected by the magnet, while anything radiating a purple aura can be grappled to with the putty. The game starts relatively linear, where the player will obtain the magnet and have to solve puzzles to get to the middle section of the level. However, once the player receives the putty, the game's exploration becomes a lot more implicit, and the player is free to traverse to the higher levels of the room through 4 separate paths. In addition, the player is given the ability to wind up at the start of the game. This ability works similar to a dash, though rather than giving the player a quick burst of acceleration, the length of time accelerating depends on how many gears the player has obtained. Throughout the game, the player will also come across different windy keys to help speed up the time it takes to wind up. There are also various other items that the player can obtain, such as batteries offering quality of life upgrades like double jumping, acceleration control, and hovering. Though similar to collecting all of the gears and windy keys, they are not necessary to complete the game and purely encourage exploration. Here, I'll hand off the script to Jane to discuss the early art direction and level design concepts for the project based on these core mechanics. So, take it away, Jane.
Hello, my name is Jane Anderson, and I am the concept artist for Fun Size. From a design standpoint, I had to work closely with our group lead Joey to make a cohesive level design concept that paired well with the gameplay progression he had in mind. I had to keep in mind the mechanics our group had discussed, and refer to the gameplay notes when designing. I worked in iterations, taking critiques and changing aspects of the design to fit our ideas as they developed. I also had to think about our scale, designing furniture placement based on W.I.P.I's size as compared to the rest of the room. Once scale and layout were complete, I compiled a list of references alongside the colored concept I had done first to develop the tone and theme of the room. I had to think about important narrative questions. What kind of child lives in this room? What's this kid's personality like? What color palette are we shooting for? The room's palette became heavy on primary colors and simplistic light wood textures. We wanted something light and airy that reflected the room of a tween from around 2009. The UI elements, logo, tooltips, and effects became more pastel to drive the cute aesthetic of the level. In the end, we have something kid-friendly that doesn't necessarily alienate an older audience. W.I.P.I's design was fun to do. I focused heavily on silhouette and combined ideas from other group members to make a protagonist that represented a little of everyone. W.I.P.I is a tiny toy-like robot that uses the same primary pastel color palette found in the environment. He is mostly plastic and has a cute digital face panel to express his emotions, much like many kids' toys from the mid-2000s. Being a prototype of a 12-year-old, he still has analog elements, such as the large wind-up key lodged in his back. The key adds visual interest to W.I.P.I's backside, since that is what the player sees the most, and plays a significant role in his mobility throughout the game. When designing W.I.P.I, I took inspiration from the designs of both Pixar's WALL-E and Eve, and found a happy medium between the two. He has a sleek exclamation point silhouette with some rickety elements like his eyebrows and the key. W.I.P.I ended up as a unity of the old and the new. Among my other responsibilities were creating particle effects strewn about the level, creating and texturing some meshes, and making the UI. Our level's UI and effects were meant to reinforce the childlike nature of the level, so I worked in iterations to make something that felt almost like a blueprint or sketch. The main UI wheel, found on the bottom right of the player's screen, serves many purposes. Since Fun Size is a collect-a-thon with many power-ups to get, I wanted something that could demonstrate the acquisition of these items without making a full-blown inventory. The UI wheel serves as a puzzle that fills in as the items are found and works as a stamina meter for when W.I.P.I winds up to move faster. The wheel has a space for every item obtained without feeling too cluttered and displays them logically in context to what the object does in-game. The rest of the UI mainly uses my handwriting, which matches the notes and papers found throughout the level. This ultimately connects those elements for more cohesion. The 2D assets found scattered in the level are hand-drawn or handwritten, as if the child had actively made them himself. You can read all of them, and may even find some fun references and Easter eggs. There are even some concept sketches of W.I.P.I himself that our child character drew, including some obscene powers that might have been scrapped. With W.I.P.I being so small, those assets had to be individualistic and readable. I also wanted to add a level of personality and charm to our game environment. Via environmental storytelling, you can tell the child that inhabits this room is a thoughtful, reserved, intelligent kid that loves puns and things like Lord of the Rings. He might also have a bit of a problem with the number of X-Acto blades all over the place. In summation, those were my contributions and responsibilities for the development of Fun Size. I designed the ideas behind the look and feel, and helped my peers bring them to life. I wanted to add charm and persona, while designing assets that kept in line with the feel and scale of the level.
Thanks for the insight, Jane. After we came up with a concept for our game, level, and character, it was time to start setting the scene. I used Jane's level design concepts and translated them to a 3D space through grayboxing. The room's shape went through a few massive changes due to critiques we got from our professor, and the shape of our graybox helped us get a feel for how these iterations felt in-game before we began implementing the main set pieces. Once we knew exactly what we wanted to do, which was around week 2, I decided to start honing in on an actual production plan. I used project management tools like Trello and Excel to create a concise list of every mechanic that needed to be implemented, every step in the level design process, every asset that needed to be completed, and every sound that needed to be added to the project. Obviously, these lists would update as Fun Size progressed in development, though to start, it was a good rule of thumb we could use to manage the scope of our project. In the end, Caleb set up a GitHub for the project to manage source control over the following weeks. I then sat down with the team and sorted out all of the tasks for everyone individually throughout the next several weeks. We discussed our strengths and weaknesses, which gave me a better idea of which tasks to assign to who. Our goal each week was to complete everything on our individual lists, and if we had the chance to move on to the next week's tasks, we would do it. Once we had our next 4 weeks of development lined up, it was time to get to work. Now, I'll pass the torch to Caleb to discuss everything that went into developing the core mechanics and functions of the game.
Hello everybody, my name is Caleb Waldrop and I served as the team's programmer and composer. To start on the mechanics, I actually designed the little lean that W.I.P.I does first. This game is very focused on cuteness and personality, so before I implemented any of the functional mechanics, I wanted to make sure that our main character's movement looked and felt exactly like we imagined. This makes our character fun to play with even before any crazy mechanics or a player model. Once the player's movement was established, I began to work on the 2 main collectible abilities, the magnet and the putty. I designed the magnet to allow the player to pull faster or slower based on where they look, which gave the mechanic a little bit more interactivity. The grapple is composed of two separate mechanics, one for fast movement and one for more control. This gives the player a few options to play with and lets the player control their own pacing. Afterwards, I moved on to W.I.P.I's hover and wind-up abilities. I knew that these would be easier to implement, so I saved them for last so that I could build them around whatever I'd already programmed, instead of adding layers of complexity onto the more difficult stuff. These abilities are designed to be quality of life upgrades past the first gear, and so are meant to increase either speed, control, or reach. The wind-up ability allows the player to jump longer distances, the hover allows the player to control themselves mid-air, and the batteries give various things like double jump or added acceleration and deceleration. Over the course of this project, I encountered several technical obstacles that pushed me to learn more about Unreal and 3D math. In implementing the stool that the player pulls around, I had to play with vectors and rotators in a way that stretched my 3D problem-solving skills. The wheels are all separate objects from the stool, meaning that the stool has to follow the wheel being pulled at a specific distance, and must rotate to face the wheel so that they appear to actually be attached. The way in which Unreal handles rotation makes this difficult, and I had to perform some rotation mathematics in a system that I was initially unfamiliar with. Later, I had to delve into unfamiliar territory in regard to materials while constructing the UI and mirror object. The player's material is actually capable of hiding itself from only the player camera, and the round progress bar in the UI, for winding up and taking off, uses a material with a spiral gradient to fill properly. Both of these took some experimenting and were immensely gratifying to add to my toolkit. When I began designing the music for the game, I knew I needed to make something bouncy and simple to reflect the player's playful environment. The main lead track is voiced by a high synth that I designed to communicate the scale of the character, almost as though W.I.P.I himself is humming the melody. The percussion is a clockwork wind-up sound, followed by a little bit of a tick-tick-tick to reflect the wind key on his back, and the initial background harmony is a thin, high, scratchy synth to create some anticipation and evoke a robot booting to life. Once the player leaves the bed, the scratchy background fades out and the bass strings begin playing to emulate the scale and warm colors of the room. The sounds of physical instruments, as opposed to synths, show the player that they exist in a real-world environment, but the lead synth still remains to maintain W.I.P.I's size and personality. Alright, Levi, let's hear from you about your experience creating some of the models and sound effects for our project.
Hello, my name is Levi Walker, and I oversaw quite a bit of the modeling for this game's assets. In addition to this, I also worked to create and curate the sound effects for FunSize, while also doing some amount of set dressing, texturing, and particle creation. I began my journey working on FunSize by modeling the ceiling fan and multiple shelves. The former serves as a giant hero piece in the level, while the latter acts as platforming for the player. While creating the ceiling fan asset, I modularized the mesh to allow the blades to spin as they would in real life. This was one of the more rewarding models to complete and implement into the game, as I could tell that this project was expanding my abilities and workflow upon finishing it. Apart from the ceiling fan and shelves, however, I also created the treasure chest, vent, bolts, rolling stool, step stool, tinker desk, clothes hamper, bedroom door, gaming device, water bottle, and the various cardboard boxes strewn about the room. Each of these seem like simple models from afar, but considering their scale compared to our player character, they needed to be enormous and highly detailed. Alex, Jane, and Peter worked on many of the other models essential to creating this space, such as the bed and covers, clothes, papers, thumbtacks, cubbies, wardrobes, curtains, walls, ceiling, books, and many other valuable assets. Alex worked tirelessly to ensure the bed was scaled correctly and fit the room. Peter made sure that the cubbies and wardrobes were not only to scale but also modular so that the doors could be movable by W.I.P.I's magnetism. Jane ensured that our environmental storytelling was consistent throughout the level by creating the sticky notes and papers strewn about the level. In the end, all four of us collaborated to match styles, scale, poly count, and theme. Although most of my work pertains to modeling, UVs, texturing, and implementation, I was also in charge of collecting, recording, and arranging the various sound effects integral to selling our game's environment and tone to the audience. Audio editing software is quite accessible nowadays, so I used what I could find at my disposal to curate and edit the SFX found within FunSize. In addition, I am adept with GarageBand, and I would constantly upload audio files into the software to perform various edits such as pitch correction or making sound cues loopable. I ended up creating and collecting over 90 sound effects for FunSize, and as a team, we narrowed down the list to approximately 50 to 60 that we would move forward with. Now that I've talked about paying close attention to detail for each of these models, I'll let Alex go over the challenges of texturing and creating materials for these bad boys.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex, and I'm the lead modeler and texture artist for FunSize. The materials in FunSize are, for the most part, using one master material, which all instance materials are based on. The master material enabled us to quickly create and preview changes to any material instance, or all materials at once through the master. In addition, our master material supported several textures and optional tweaks to make adjustments in-game quickly. There are 3 texture slots in the master: the base color, ORM, which stands for ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic, and the normal map. These textures are parameters, meaning that they can be different in each instanced material. In addition, several optional tweaks can be adjusted per instance, such as shifting the hue, multiplying by a color, adjusting the roughness, or flattening the normals. These options are also controlled via parameters in the master. All of the textures in FunSize are created with a combination of Photoshop, 3D Coat, or Substance Painter. Special attention was paid to texture size and levels of detail, keeping in mind the scale of our game and that most textures can be viewed from up close. The textures also needed to be believable for the setting. A child's room. Nothing could appear overly grungy, dirty, or worn unless there was a reason for it to be that way. Despite this, even clean and new household objects have imperfections. We worked hard to break up flat colors and dull areas with these imperfections, while keeping a newer look. The original reference sketches from Jane and our mood boards were essential for establishing our visual style in the room. Early on, we worked to unify our export format from 3D Coat. It's far more efficient to use texture files with ORM packed together than to have these attributes be separate. This is because occlusion, roughness, and metallic properties range from 0 to 1, meaning that they can fit in a grayscale image, or in our case, a single channel of a regular PNG image file. All in all, it allows Unreal to read each channel individually and use them as properties and not as colors. I'll now leave it to Peter to discuss how he translated Jane's original design of our player character into a 3D space, and what vibes he was going for when bringing W.I.P.I to life through animation.
Hello, again my name is Peter, and I was responsible for actually modeling out Jane's wonderful design. When we had W.I.P.I's final design agreed upon, I needed 2 things to really start: a scale reference of the W.I.P.I's height and an imported image of the design into a Maya project. Past that, it was simply involved modeling his key features and trying to match up to the references as much as possible. I kept the poly count low on the initial creation to make sure I could use the smooth function as the final step. When it came to animating our special little guy, I'd animated small objects with looping effects and characters that the player could interact with, but never the player itself. The team gave me some instructions as to what animations we wanted for the character, but the actual form they took was given freely up to me. As some main aspects of the character were being handled through code, I first had to come to consensus with our programmer Caleb about what elements I was animating in the first place. It was decided that any movement of the character facing left and right would be handled by me, and I was to not rotate the key. This meant, in addition, that the arms, eyebrows, and up and down motion were to be moved by me. With the limited elements to move, it was important to animate them with a purpose. The arms would be the directors of motion. As the ratio between the arms and the body is fairly small, I wanted them to feel like they were pulling him in specific directions. The eyebrows were signifiers of forward and backward motion. They would be pulled in a certain direction when the character was moving quickly or stopped abruptly. In addition, as I made sure the eyebrows could be moved individually, they could also help to express emotion. The key in the back was the best element of secondary motion, as it would react later than the rest of the body and bounce around the keyhole at times. I did also cheat the animations at times, as the character would increase or decrease his scale on certain animations. This would be a bit of a no-no for proper animators, but it helped to give the character some pop in the animations, and gave him a little more cartoony feel. All the animations that I exported were placed into the game where Caleb was able to place them at the appropriate points that the character was taking the action. He was then able to adjust any of the animations to the appropriate speed in the game engine, and the game engine would handle the position changes between animations.
Thanks for the info, guys. That's not to say our project was all smooth sailing, however. A few challenges we encountered almost held us back from having a cohesive project. For example, our camera was initially locked to the player from behind, making the game feel less engaging. We also had trouble conveying depth and scale, though adding a playful LUT alongside creating an enhanced depth of field really sold the look of a massive child's room. However, this in turn made it challenging to convey to the player that the vent was their primary objective. We had to rely on line, color, and shape to direct the player on the right course, whether through assets strewn about or through the direction of the light through the window. In addition, we added a mirror object that, with the right material, would point right in the direction of the vent at all times without obstructing the view through the depth of field. Our final challenge was trying to keep a consistent color palette. The art style of a game will always shift drastically by the end of its development, and that's especially true with a game that has 5 separate artists. Although, after about 4 weeks, our team seemed to find a groove, and we began creating a more engaging and stylistically cohesive product. As you can see, we took everything we knew about designing a game and gave it our all to make it the most impressive project possible within a 12-week time frame. This game taught me a lot about my role as a producer and designer, and gave me a lot to think about in terms of organizing Chiaroscuro's production as a solo developer. That being said, I'd like to leave the floor open to a few comments from my team members who'd like to share their experience working on this project.
To sum up, this project was a blast. I got to work with a top-notch team of people on a very, very fun project, and was able to be more than just some designer's chisel. If I could work on projects like this full-time, I would be a very happy code goblin. Thank you to all my team members for making this entire thing possible.
Looking at my concepts alongside the final game makes me very proud. Levi, Alex, Peter, Joey, and Caleb all did a masterful job breathing life into this project, and I couldn't have asked for a better team.
While we were working on this game, I had epiphanies regarding not only my workflow, but also my teamwork abilities. Working with 5 other developers on this project was the most wonderful and fulfilling part of this entire project. I can confidently say that now more than ever, I believe that cooperation is of utmost importance when developing a video game. Team synergy can never be understated. Our weekly meetings were informative, motivating, and most definitely essential in the ladder rungs that lead to the product we are exceedingly happy to show you all today. We would constantly reply to each other in our group channel to answer each other's questions and ensure we were all staying on task. Fun Size is an especially important project to me, and I will always hold it close to my heart. Although we had academic reasons to create the game, it felt like a passion project from the very start.
I'm very happy with how this project has turned out. I employed many of the skills and techniques I've learned working on previous productions while helping to create Fun Size. It's also given me a few ideas for future productions.
This was the first group project that I've taken part in for a game. I would be happy if all projects ran half as smoothly as our operation did. There was no drama between the team, and every single one of them is incredibly skilled at what they do. More than halfway through the project, we realized that we had all been in another class together in the past, and that we were all secretly in love with each other's work from that class. These are people I will always remember for how much respect I have for them and their work. And I know all their future endeavors are things to watch out for. I am so blessed to have been part of this outstanding team.
Thank you all for tuning in to this longer form informative devlog. If you are interested in learning more about Fun Size, the 15-minute demo can be downloaded for free from the itch site in the description. Let us know what you think of the project. As you all know, there will be more content coming soon, so make sure to subscribe if this kind of video interests you. Take care, guys. BlackberryKin signing off.